The Guardian has a report today, this week rather. Headline, young women are the most progressive group in American history. Young men are checked out. So this is a dynamic that we're all very familiar with at this point, I think. And this is just the latest sort of report and commentary on it. I'll read a little bit of it. And I have a few points of my own to make about this. When Donald Trump strutted onto stage at the Republican National Convention last month, it was to a raucous cover of James Brown's It's a Man's World. The song credits men with inventing cars, trains, lights, boats, toys, and commerce, which, we did. The message was not subtle, at least not to Melissa Deckman. Quote, this idea of America needing someone who is a strong, masculine figure, I think the Republican campaign this year is doing it even in a more pronounced and overt way than it did in 2016, said Deckman, CEO of the Public Religion Research Institute. You have a lot of younger men admiring the strength of Trump, or what they think is strong. Deckman would know in her forthcoming book, The Politics of Gen Z, How the Youngest Voters Will Shape Our Democracy. She dives into the deep political divides between Gen Z women and men and explores how they feel about growing up in the Trump era. Based on interviews with roughly 90 Gen Z political activists, numerous focus groups, and extensive polling, Deckman has identified what she calls a historic reverse gender gap. She's found that Gen Z men are becoming more conservative as well as increasingly indifferent to politics, bucking long-standing trends dating back to at least the 1970s that saw young people across the board voting liberal and men being generally more involved in politics than women. Meanwhile, Gen Z women have not only become the most progressive cohort in the U.S., in U.S. history rather, but are also expected to outpace their male peers across virtually every measure of political involvement, such as donating money, volunteering for campaigns, registering people to vote, and of course, voting. Young women were outstripping men on political engagement well before Joe Biden stepped aside in favor of Kamala Harris. Now with Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee, a generation already riven by a canyon-wide political gender gap is watching a contest between a woman and blah, blah, blah. So in 2022, 49% of Gen Z men said that the United States had become too soft and feminine, Deckman found. Just a year later, 60% of Gen Z men said the same. So we find that this divide is not only present, but it's growing deeper and deeper. So this is, again, a well-established fact at this point. A lot has been said and written about the political gender divide. Women, unmarried women specifically, and we talk about Gen Z women, of course, there are unmarried women who are older, but so it's not just Gen Z. It's really, as we're talking about, unmarried women are much more likely to be liberal. In fact, Republicans win when you break down the gender demographics any other way, Republicans win. Republicans win married women, they win married men, they win unmarried men. The only group they don't win are the unmarried women. And they lose that group by like a wide margin. So it's a fascinating and quite troubling trend, which is why it's been discussed so much, for good reason. And there are two questions that immediately arise, of course, which is, why is this the case? Number one. And number two, what do we do about it? Which is more a question of, if you're a conservative or if you're a Republican, what do you do about it? How do you respond to it? The why is a long answer. It's very multifaceted. Everyone has theories about why it's breaking down this way. Some of the theories are good. Many times I think that they're fanciful. Why are women, unmarried women especially, trending so liberal? Well, part of it is that, there's a lot. Part of it is that women are naturally more emotional and empathetic. Democrat rhetoric and tactics play on that and exploit that. We know that Democrats rarely argue for a policy by laying out its practical benefits or explaining how it will make your life better and your community better in some measurable way. They rarely do that, unless they're just offering bribes, right? Unless they're just saying, we're going to pay off your student loans, here's some welfare. So in that case, they will try to appeal, you might say, in a more practical way. But aside from bribery, they don't spend a lot of time explaining, like, here's a policy, and no, we're not going to give you money, but when we enact this policy, it's going to actually make your life better. And here's how. In ways that you can see and feel and experience. They don't spend a lot of time doing that. They make the emotional argument. which is cloaked usually as a moral argument. And it's very effective with women. It's less effective with men. Now, also, there's the simple fact that Democrats suck up to women and really deify women and celebrate women constantly while demonizing and scapegoating men. That's another part of the story here. Like, you're just never going to hear a Democrat politician say the word men or man in an explicitly positive context. You'll never hear it. They'll say it in a neutral context, sometimes. They'll say it in a negative context, talking about the problems with men and what men are doing wrong. You will literally never hear any of them ever say anything positive about men as a group. You will never, ever hear it. That's the kind of thing that we're so used to it that you hear that and it just kind of bounces off of you. But really think about that. And you could go looking for an example to disprove my point, but you can't find it. Like, go try to find, I'll give you like the last 20 years. Go try to find a Democrat politician singling out men specifically in a positive way. Never happens. Never happens. So, and that's not the case for women. Women, I mean, women are flattered all the time. And most cases, if you hear a Democrat politician say the word woman or women, it will be followed by something complimentary. So women are flattered, men are demoralized. When this article says that men are checked out, that's the point. Like, that's the reason behind the demoralization campaign. It's actually not that surprising that you have young men that are checked out. I don't know if they're checked out to the degree that this article in The Guardian claims, but that's the idea. When you're constantly scapegoating and demonizing a certain group and telling this group that you don't care about them, you don't need them, you don't want them, it has a demoralizing effect. So there's that as well. And then I think it's also undoubtedly the case that women are more collectivist in a sense. Communal would be maybe the less pejorative way of saying it. And, I don't mean it as a pejorative. Women are more group-oriented. They are. And this has many positive results. It means that women make friends, they stay socially connected. When they get married, they're the ones who make sure that the family keeps in touch with friends and family and is involved in the community and goes out and does like things goes out and does, there's a community event somewhere, there's a fair or something happening in the community and there are families there. It's like 95% of the families are there because the mom insisted that they come. And so that's the positive end of women being wired that way. There's also the downside. Women and girls can tend to fall more easily into trends and fads, more susceptible to peer pressure, more harmed mentally by social alienation and ostracization. There's a reason that adolescent girls are so much more likely to be gender dysphoric, so much more likely to develop eating disorders. There's always like some kind of trend like that making its way through middle schools and high schools, some kind of self-destructive trend that adolescent girls are getting wrapped up into. And right now it's gender dysphoria. And this relates back to the political question because we live in a progressive society where all of our institutions push progressivism. So women are just more likely to be influenced by that and to care about that. Taylor Swift is liberal, and to a lot of her female fans, that matters. They want to have the same values as Taylor Swift and the other Taylor Swift fans. Like, it's just a fact. Men are not impervious to this, are not impervious to groupthink, obviously, but as men, we tend to have more of a contrarian, more of an antisocial streak to us that can, in some contexts, serve us well. It can also cause problems, but In this case, it makes us less susceptible to the kind of groupthink that leads to people becoming green-haired wokesters, right? In fact, it's interesting that the article mentions how back in the 60s and 70s, young men were more liberal and more politically involved. And this is seen as kind of a mysterious fact. What happened? Well, I wonder if what I'm talking about here isn't part of the explanation for that. Back 50 years ago, it was countercultural, it was rebellious, it was contrarian to be liberal. And so, more young men were attracted to it, partly for that reason. And now it has flipped, and so have young men. Now, of course, the problem with my theory is that it probably doesn't hold up if you go back further. I don't think you're going to find historically that young men have always just been like reflexively opposed to the dominant cultural value system. In fact, I'm sure that isn't the case. So it's not quite as simple as that, I admit. So then you have to go deeper into the male psyche. Like, if men are more likely to be rebellious and contrarian and countercultural today, why is that? Why are men attracted to that? I think it might be the danger, kind of the fight is why we find that's appealing, especially younger men. Well, older societies have had other ways of harnessing that energy. Older societies, especially, the farther you go back, I think the more that's the case. That young men have always had this hunger for danger, for the fight, for adventure. And when you go back into earlier times, there were other ways to kind of naturally harness that in society. Not so much now. And so young men look for other outlets. So I think that's part of what's going on here, and there's more to it than that even. You could spend hours breaking it down. But the most immediate question is like, okay, this is the case. For whatever reason, this is the situation we're facing right now. That unmarried women are very, very liberal, more liberal than they've ever been by a huge margin. And they are, and in that way, they're like a sore thumb sticking out from all the other groups. Married, unmarried men, married women. That's the fact. From a political perspective, what do you do about that right now? And this is why I go back to, I'll keep saying it till I'm blue in the face here, but yeah, long term, as a conservative, you got to find some way to turn this trend around. But right now, especially in this election season, there's nothing we can do about that. Unmarried women, single women are just very liberal, and that's it. We're not gonna change that in the next 3 months. It's not gonna happen. Which means, now I'm not saying that you give up on single women politically, but in a way you kind of have to. Like you're not gonna win them. It's just it. That's done right now. It's not gonna happen. So you really don't tailor any of your messaging to this group that you cannot win right now. You want to come up with a 30-year plan so that 30 years from now, maybe you can win them? Then yeah, we could talk about that. But right now, that's a 30-year plan. That's not a 3-month plan. Right now, you have to look at the groups that are just, you can't win. And say, okay, well, like, we're happy to have your vote. Please, you're welcome to come vote for us. But we're not going to do a whole lot to try to appeal to you specifically, because you've made it clear you don't want anything to do with us right now. Okay, have it your way. And then you have to look and mobilize the voters who you can attract and you can appeal to. And that's what Kamala's campaign is doing. It's part of the way that they're getting these big rallies and they're creating this illusion that she's some sort of political sensation. But they know what their crowd is, they know who they have to mobilize, and that's what they're doing. That's why they had Megan the Stallion at a rally. That's not going to appeal. Like, if you want to appeal to, let's say, married white men, you're not going to do it with Megan the Stallion. But what Kamala's campaign is saying is like, okay, we know we don't have you people. We don't need you. Married white men, who cares? Like, this is the group we need, and we're going to get them, and we're going to drown you out by getting all these people. And it's say whatever you want about it, but it's a smart political strategy, and it could work. And Republicans need to be doing the same in the reverse. They need to be saying, okay, like, we're not going to, unmarried single women, Gen Z women, not going to get them. What can we do? How can we? Okay, there's a lot of disaffected single and married men. What can we do to appeal to them specifically and directly and explicitly, and try to mobilize them to get into this thing and get excited about it? And I think that there's some of that happening, but not nearly enough. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.